Today we're going to wrap up the explorations around using the 3Bs framework. So looking at the beneficiary, the business, and the banker, and starting to equally prioritise our understanding of what each of those groups needs when it comes to telling the story of and demonstrating that we're actually making a difference and contributing to the areas that we've identified we care about as we merge money and meaning in our business. So today, in this last episode, we're focusing in on the banker. Let me remind you who sits in that category. So the banker, depending on your organisation, is going to be made up of either your customers, it might be internal shareholders, or it might be external investors. And it could be one or a mixture of those that are your bankers. So really what we're thinking about in this category is anyone who's driving cash into your business, wherever the money is coming from. And like last week, I'm going to use 2 questions from listeners to help us really start to look at how would we use this approach that I'm proposing to you as we think about things related to the banker. Let me read you the first question. How do you talk about blended purposes when you have investors who may not share that as a priority? This is a very common challenge. And if you remember back a few weeks back, we asked this question around, well, how do you share stories about this impact or the contribution you're making without it feeling like you're shouting it from the rooftops? Do you remember that kind of piece of like, oh, it starts to feel a bit uncomfortable? This question framed at an investor who doesn't necessarily care about what you care about is an interesting next level example of figuring out this aspect of deeply understanding our audience and then framing our information towards them. So when I think about this question, the way that I would respond to that and taking the 3Bs approach is really just to again remind us that this is about understanding the audience that we're talking to and really being clear that when it comes to sharing about our contribution, we need to think about the key factors that are important to different audience groups. So when you look at what you've landed on as an organisation around, here's our articulation of our mission, what we're doing and how within the core business activities we are contributing to a specific aspect that we've articulated as the vision. So the piece you want to contribute to, the change you want to see in the world. The first question you need to ask from a 3Bs framework perspective is, does the banker actually care about the outcomes that we've identified as an organisation? So in the example of this question, the banker is an external investor. And from the framing of the question, we already kind of have a sense of that because they've already said, how do I tell this story when I have an investor who's not actually motivated by the same things that we are? So when we'd ask that question, we'd say, no, actually our banker is not really that interested in these pieces we've identified as important outcomes and change we want to see in the world. So then the next level of the question would be to say, okay, if they don't care about that broader outcome or the contribution we're trying to make, do they care about a smaller incremental change that happens on the way to that outcome? So wearing one of my old hats around impact investment and the impact management and measurement side, we would call that an output rather than an outcome. So it's like this immediate change that happens after you do something. The reason why this is the important second question as you drill into what your bankers, in this case the investors, care about, is that often bankers are satisfied with a level of detail that we might think is quite superficial or unsatisfying because we're passionate about this issue. And so we think, oh my goodness, why would you only want to know that? It doesn't really light us up around this topic that we've identified and that we care about. But while it may be unsatisfying to you, here's the little piece of truth I'm going to tell you. It's not actually about you. And so when we're doing the 3Bs approach and we're focusing on the audience, this piece is key, and actually taking the judgment out of it And remembering that your mission, your ideas around contribution is not actually that you've stated, our mission is to make everyone believe what we believe. I'm pretty sure that's not what you wrote, right? So you've identified specific things that either you are hoping to make a positive change on, or you've identified a negative piece that you are trying to work against, right? So you're saying, I'm moving towards this positive opportunity, or I'm addressing this injustice or this gap in a market that I think we have a better solution for. Remember that. Come back to, it's why it's important to write these things down. Read through what you wrote as your mission or the piece that you actually care about in the world through all of these exercises that we've done together. And just remind yourself that it's the combination of those things you care about in the world and then your unique skills as an organisation that allows you to add something of value to that issue you've identified. That is where the mission sits. And when you're feeling frustrated that a particular investor or banker doesn't actually care about it in the same way you do, just remember your mission isn't to make them believe what you believe or care about what you care about. Don't waste your energy in that space. Just come back to the piece of, I'm not going to preach. I'm not going to try to make them care by telling them really compelling stories and lots of them. Just tune in, figure out what they want to hear. And then if it is at that level of what I called outputs, so let me give you an example in case you're going, what the hell is an output? If it's more like they don't want you to be telling a detailed narrative or giving lots of data around a big shift that's occurred that I was talking about as those outcomes or the big contribution you're trying to make. They might just want you to have a really simple infographic that tells things like, how many people did you work with? Or how much money did your clients save as a result of this? They're output data, right? So they're those incremental changes. They might just want a few of those numbers that make them go, oh, great, this is having an impact. That might be enough. The piece to kind of wrap up this first question of how do you talk about blended purposes when you have investors who may not share that as a priority? The short answer is to identify whether it is a priority for them or not. And then if it's not, I'm actually saying to you, don't waste too much energy trying to make it a priority for them. Instead, tell them what they want to and need to hear to keep engaged with you, and use the information that you're gathering to inform your decision-making internally. So in the category we talked about last week of for the business, be informed, use that data, use those beautiful stories of transformation or the detailed data that you have to make your organisation better and to make sure you are getting better outcomes. But don't think that that means you have to share that information with an investor, your banker, if they don't care about it. I'm going to come at this from one more angle, like I did last week. Let's give you two in case the first one doesn't land. The second question, which has a different type of banker in their business, was framed like this. A challenge I have is that I put out a ton of free content that helps people who can't afford my services get great results. Yet people still criticise me for charging for my services. The work is very altruistic, but people always demonise me when I say there is a cost. This is a really interesting one. And when I read this, because it's from a really established business leader whose business is actually doing really well, growing, and is at scale, I was quite surprised at the extent and the regularity of how much pushback they are getting from the market around their fees and charging for their services. Because often that sits in a category when something does have a strong social piece where people think it should be a charity running it. If this is an issue for you where there is this pushback or discomfort coming at you from customers, so remember I said one of the types of banker can be a customer because they're putting cash into your system through buying from you. Here's how I would use the 3Bs approach to help this business leader. The two responses I would have is to say, firstly, all feedback is not created equal. So if you're hearing this, if there is this criticizing, and it's a pretty strong word that they used around being like the demonizing, right? So that's pretty strong language. If that is coming at you, the first thing we want to identify is whether or not that feedback is coming from a group that we want to listen to. Because if it is criticism from people who are not your ideal customers anyway, then potentially we're going to put far less effort into what we change or how we position things differently. So I do want to make that as the first starting point from using our 3Bs framework, is to say, when we say we need to understand the audience, there is a discernment piece here around criticism that says, let's first figure out if we're listening to the right voices. If we assume that this criticism is from ideal customers, then it's actually really important feedback. If there is a pattern emerging for you where there's some kind of discomfort from your customer base around how you operate your business, you need to listen to that. And the work that I am proposing and the questions I'm giving you are actually a really good way to address it. So let's dig into it a little bit. If those customers are your ideal people that you want to be working with, then I would suggest a few things. Firstly, you are going to need to change the positioning and start to think about the aspects of your marketing and how and what you have out in the market that you are sharing around the actual results being achieved. This example, if the pushback is from ideal customers, is actually the perfect one to say this is when you should be shouting your impact from the rooftops. I said to you a few weeks back, if your customers don't care about the things you're doing internally, then it would be quite strange for you to be talking publicly about it. In this instance, the feedback you're getting from people is that they see your area of work as something that everyone should have access to, and that they don't want it to be an area where there's exclusion or where it's only available to people who can pay top dollar. And so if that is the case, what I'm suggesting here is you need to lean in really heavily and actually not just think it's obvious or it's a given that you are offering a lot of value for free. So the framing of the question was saying, I put out tons of free content that helps people who can't afford my services already get great results. Okay, you know that as the business leader and the person in there doing the work. Maybe your market hasn't actually connected those dots. It may not be as clear to them. The piece in addressing this question is that you may be in a position where by understanding your banker, the customer, better, you now need to fully swing into and commit to capturing the stories of transformation that is happening in your business and very clearly articulating where it's happening through your free content and the results you're getting from your paid clients. Instead of thinking you're being humble and not drawing attention to it, this signal you're getting from your banker, the customer, is telling you that they actually care about knowing that transformation is happening. And when I think about the competitive advantages, you've heard me talking about the fact that what I'm trying to get you to do in your business and merging money and meaning, I want you to get to a place where you can actually leverage competitive advantages connected to what you care about. So not just competitive advantages that help you make more money over here, disconnected from what you care about. I want them to be connected. This example in this question is showing us that you have a banker, a customer here, who actually wants to feel a sense of identity or shared values. If I look at the 9 competitive advantages, and again, I've shared all of this with you in previous episodes, but we'll pop it in the show notes. The 9 competitive advantages that I laid out that you can leverage from merging money and meaning. In this example, I would say that the key pieces that this business leader has to tap into are strengthening brand and improving market position, increasing customer loyalty, and creating an increased sense of purpose. They would be the 3 competitive advantages I would be thinking about and really making very distinct or explicit connections between how we operate as a business and these areas. Because if we think of something like the customer loyalty here, because we're talking about the customer as the banker, in that pushback and criticism or demonizing that is described in the question, if we leant in and told our story better and shared the transformation, shared the results of our free work and the work that we're doing that is not for paid customers, we would actually find, and this is not just me making this up, this is again based on working with hundreds of leaders in multiple different countries over more than 2 decades, what you will find is that those customers who this is important to actually will now feel a sense of identity. They will feel a sense of shared values with you as an organisation, because they can say, oh, I'm really excited now in the paid capacity with the work I want to do with this company. I'm proud to be associated with them, right? So we do that piece around increasing customer loyalty, because the piece that was currently a pain point for them and making them feel awkward with you was because there wasn't an alignment of values, and they were feeling like it's actually not fair that people can only get this if they pay you. Does that aspect of that example and starting to see how when we listen to the criticism, when we understand that audience group of the banker, in this case the customer, and we bring it into connecting it up with those competitive advantages, we start to be able to not just see these things as frustrating or another task to do, but we can actually use it to create that beautiful self-reinforcing loop where we can take the feedback and use it to actually strengthen the types of results and outcomes we can generate that we care about, but do it in a way that also has the financial upside. So we can get to that place that I talked about where we're able to strengthen our brand and improve our position in the market. We're able to do the piece of increasing customer loyalty and create that increased sense of purpose by hearing the customers and then giving them what they need. Because if you think about the aspects that over these last few weeks, when I've talked about the 3Bs process, when you think about the fact that what you've been doing is simply tuning into the aspects of what different audiences care about, you're starting to understand what are the questions they would have that I need to be able to answer, what is the evidence I need to be able to give them so that they feel confident to continue to engage with me as an organisation. That's all this is. It's as simple as those 2 questions. And when we come at it from that perspective and then do the dance and figure out who to listen to, what to give them and how to give them that information, we'll be far better equipped to not just be responding to everything, because again, in this space, I always want you to remember, I'm not trying to tell you that you need to be all things to all people or jump on the bandwagon of every issue that comes up. This is coming from a place of you're clear on what you care about as an organisation, how you uniquely can contribute to it, and now you're simply using these frameworks and questions I give you to help you better integrate it and strengthen your business model on the back end of it. I hope that's been helpful and that you are starting to see these ideas move from a category of being intellectually interesting into being something that you at least have a glimpse of how it relates to your business in particular. In that process, my hope is that you are in our current masterclass series. So this week we're kind of midway through that. If you're not, it's not too late to jump in, watch replays and catch up for the rest of the week. But this is going to be an ongoing journey for you. None of this, you're not going to learn it in one podcast. Like I said, I'm hoping you're starting to get curious and you're starting to connect the dots for your business. But I would really encourage you to think about the reality of what help you're going to need to make this all connected to and integrated into your business. Catch up on the replays if you haven't joined us in the launch. Join the rest live if you can. And the piece that I'm going to ask you today is if you are vaguely curious and wanting to understand this more, there's a link in the show notes to book a call with me directly, because what I want you to do is to actually shift out of just thinking and start to kind of have the conversation of what would the next logical step be. You're going to need support as you do this. I will continue to give you through the podcast and through the free masterclasses a bunch of tools and resources that you can use yourself if that's what's best for you. But I want you to jump on a call with me if you're in the category where you're thinking, I would like to explore actually getting some support on this and being able to leapfrog and fast track some of these pieces in my own business. So use that link, join us for the masterclass. And I really hope that as we wrap up this series around the 3 Bs, that you have found it a useful and really practical tool. Feel free to share with me if there's been some aha moments for you or some changes that you've made in your business as a result. I'm always keen to hear your questions, but I would also love to hear those positive sides of what's changing and what's working for you. So connect with me if you want to share those stories. Join us live where you can in the masterclass, and let's help you figure out what this looks like on your journey of merging money and meaning in your business.